Good morning and afternoon, and whenever you're watching this, wherever you are, I am back here again today because yesterday I had some great responses to the video I shared, really talking about gaps in your communication, and this has clearly been a topic that needs a lot of help. And what I wanted to focus on today specifically, because it came up in the Your Momentum Now community, for those of you who aren't members of that, I always have that address in the lower third on the bottom, Your Momentum Now, free community. Check it out if you're not part of it. But one of the questions that came up in the community yesterday was, how do I figure out exactly what to say? So if I'm going to do the strategy that we talked about in our previous video, where I discussed the idea of either, sending an email and then sending out a Facebook message or a LinkedIn message or something like that to request, how do I figure out exactly what it is that I should say? And for some of you, I know you also want to focus on sending messages to new people or new connections or new prospects. And really, it breaks down into a pretty simple model. I talked a little bit yesterday about interest, action, conversion, and those are really the three stages of how a client moves through a campaign. So that's how they move from, your ad to your free thing to your paid thing to your program. Now, an interest, action, and conversion step is going to happen at each piece along the way. And that kind of dictates everything that happens that you're going to say or send in Messenger as well. So I want you to keep that in mind. It's something that I always keep in the back of my head whenever I'm having a conversation or whenever I'm creating something. And for the most part, conversations are going to be all about interest. And I developed, while I was thinking about this, I wanted to think of a simple way to lay it out. And so I developed a model that I'm going to dig into a little bit today. But if you want to grab some notes, or you want to grab a pen, a piece of paper, whatever, post it in your notepad, write these steps down. Because really, in Messenger, or when you're trying to figure out what to say, or when you're trying to figure out the right words or the right approach, it's really going to come down to this. So the first word I want you to write down is connect. So obviously, the first step is, these are real people, and a lot of people in marketing lose sight of the fact that their prospects or their targets or their leads or anybody that they're having a conversation with are actually people. And you especially see this with people who don't like to network, but they're really into digital marketing. You'll see that happen all the time, or they're really into the idea of cold calling, or they're really into the idea of stuff that's more loosely connected or professionally connected, but there's a person on the other end. And so you have to focus on a way to connect with them. Now, if that connection is in a professional context and oops, I'm going to move my mic a little bit, and that the professional context is what they want, or you're having a conversation about your service, or you're having a conversation about something specific, you can focus on connecting in that way. But you have to connect first, which means there has to be some sort of viable reason for why you're getting in touch with that person, or for why you want to know who they are. And so one of the first steps you can do when you want to connect with somebody, or when you're reaching out to somebody, is take the 30 seconds to a minute that it actually takes to look at their profile. And I know I posted even in the comments on this. It's common sense, but you'd be amazed. Like, this is infamous on dating sites too. For those of you that do anything on dating sites, Tinder, Match, OkCupid, whatever, you'll see this happen all the time. You'll get messages. It's a great way to annoy somebody when it comes to dating, and it's true in marketing too, is people spend all this time and effort and energy. Sometimes they even hire people to get them to read their profile and write their profile, and then you'll get messages from people that are just like, hey, sup? And they have nothing to do with with what was in the profile or what the person said. So read the profile. A lot of times there are going to be clues to what that person wants to talk about, to what that person's looking for, to what they're interested in, to how you can match with them. And so look through their profile and see, is there something that resonates that's going to create a connection? And a lot of times I'll go right for that. It's actually the same tactic or technique that you would use in networking. I'm going to ask questions, or I'm going to notice something about the person, and I'm going to respond directly to that. And a lot of times that's a contextual question when I'm at networking. What brings you to the event, or why are you here, or what are you looking for, or who are you looking to connect with? All of those things can give me context for that conversation. But I have to focus on connection first. If I just treat somebody or anybody watching this or any old person like they're not a person, or I don't care about what's in their profile, or I'm just shooting off messages randomly without, thinking about it, then there's no connection there. And immediately I'm shooting myself in the foot. So word number one, connection. And I'll come back to that. But obviously, focus, take the time, take the second to read their profile, see what would make sense. Then the next word I want you to write down is inquire. Inquire. So ask questions. So instead of connecting with them and going, hey, we would connect over this, instead of just assuming what that connection would be, actually ask them. So I noticed you had this in your profile, or I noticed you like this. And then ask a question, or ask, especially a relevant question is even better in message. So part of the reason why I mentioned that I believe that campaign was so successful, where we sent an email and then we jumped on a message afterwards and sent a message, was there was context for that conversation. We knew who they were because we knew they were interested in what they wanted. They were already on the email list. So we knew they were interested in that type of thing. But we obviously wanted to know a couple of different things about how interested they were. We wanted to know, were they casually interested? Were they just checking it because they were a friend? What was their interest? Did they like it? Did they not like it? Any one of those questions would be a great start for conversation. Now, when you're inquiring, you want to make sure that you try to avoid asking yes or no questions. So you don't want to ask something that's just going to take you right to the end of the conversation. Did you like this? No. That's normally going to be something that doesn't help you get to the next level of the conversation, or it's going to be awkward. So if they click that link, you might say something along the lines of, I'd love to get your feedback. What did you think, or what did you notice about the program, or what stood out to you about the program, or what did you like about it? Any of those can start a conversation. So again, try to stick with what or why questions as opposed to yes or no questions in that inquiry phase, and follow the conversation threads. So these next steps all kind of tie together. So it was connect, it's inquire, then actually see the reaction as step 3. Look for the reaction. Obviously, in a message, that's a bit harder to do, but do they respond right away? Do they not respond right away? Is their response short, like a K? Like that's the worst response to get, especially on a dating site, since we're going to use that example. If someone just responds with the letter K, you're going to be like, okay, they're clearly not interested in this thing. So is there a thoughtful response? Is it not so thoughtful? Does it seem like you're bothering them? Because the reaction is going to determine what you do next, because then you've got to respond based on their reaction. So if they're into that conversation, obviously you can continue following that thread and go through that conversation and inquire a little bit more. As opposed to, if they're not interested in it, you don't just immediately launch into a sales pitch or send them your page again or go, hey, well, I think you should do this. You actually get into a conversation. So the thing that a lot of people forget about Messenger, and I said this yesterday, and I don't care if it's Facebook, LinkedIn, direct messages on Twitter, dating sites, whatever, since apparently dating sites is the topic for today. It doesn't matter which one it is, because the reality is those are just as important as sending a text message to somebody. And most of us only send text messages to our friends. We send text messages or direct messages or personal messages to people we already know, and we have conversations. A lot of times we start those conversations specifically to get a certain response from somebody else. So to repeat those 4 steps and then take it a little bit deeper about how do you figure out what to say. So connect, focus on the connection first, inquire, see the reaction, respond. And when it's appropriate to respond with your offer or with what you're doing or with something that takes them to the next level, that's when you respond. You just don't launch into it right away. Another thing to talk about, so as you're considering your approach and you're saying, all right, I'm going to send out a message, and this doesn't matter whether it's a new person, whether it's someone that's already on your existing list and you're targeting them again, that's fine too, doesn't matter. But obviously, one thing to remember is the tone of the message. So personal, and I even like to put casual, converts much, much higher than formal in starting conversation. If you get a text message that starts with, "I would just like to inform you about the latest opportunity," and yada, 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 yada. For the most part, somebody's going to go, clearly this is a sales message. And with the amount of advertising and the amount of messages that people are getting day to day, we're just conditioned to tune them out. The minute that it starts to feel like a sales pitch, the minute I'm checked out of there, I'm like, ugh, I don't want to talk to this person. So casual starts even better. I mentioned that almost every message I send that's on Facebook starts with "hey" or "check this out." Like, I love "hey" or "check this out" messages because they feel like they're coming from me. That's what I would actually say to people, which is really important. And so keep that in mind in what you're doing. So, "Oh, hey, Miles out there. Awesome. Great to see you. Long time. Thank you very much. I appreciate it." And so personal converts much higher than formal. So, in some ways you got to throw away your sales script, or if you're going to work on a script or something that you're going to use when you're sending out, you want it to be as casual as possible. And you want it to, again, go into that inquiry right away. So your system is going to be spend a minute, read their profile. Focus on a personal message or a casual message that you can send them that's related to what you saw in their profile. "Hey, I noticed you like this," or "I noticed that we have this in common. How'd you get into that?" Or "I noticed that you clicked this link in my email. Would love to get your feedback. What did you think?" Or "What did you notice?" Or "Why'd you do that?" That kind of thing. So the questions, the inquiries have to be relevant to them, to their field, to their potential interests. Then this next step, this is the most important one, because a Facebook message of any kind is generally going to be a whole lot more personal than an email or something like that. So you've got to respect their time and attention. If you notice that you're getting short responses, if you notice that people seem to not be super into it, you've got to look for the cues. That's why I said see the reaction is such an important part. And you have to respect their time, their attention, and their commitment level. Now, this doesn't always necessarily mean they're not interested. So if someone's super busy at that point and you're hitting them with messages and they just can't respond, or one of their first responses is letting you know I'm with a client or I'm in a meeting right now, a message doesn't necessarily mean immediate response, and a lot of us are conditioned to this idea that people are going to comment on our posts right away, or they're going to respond to our Facebook messages right away, or they're going to respond to our SMS right away, when the reality is that's generally not going to happen. And I mentioned this, that one of my mentors, Martha, says all the time, no one's waiting by the inbox or no one's waiting by the text box for your call. So you got to respect their time and attention in that conversation, and you'll notice this through what they're saying. And then finally, from there, you've got to ask for and value their feedback. So that doesn't necessarily mean throw away your ideas or throw away your program, because sometimes you're going to talk to people where what you do, your services, your programs, your products, all those things just aren't a fit for someone. And that's actually okay. A lot of us take that too personally. In fact, I was coaching someone the other day that mentioned that they were really having a problem when people opted out from their lists. Like, they took it super personally because they developed all of that list through networking and personal connection and personal relationships and those types of things. And so people were opting out. And a lot of that, again, was because there was no feedback mechanism. It was just a promotional channel. And so people decided they didn't want promotion anymore. So this person started going out and having conversations with the people that opted out, especially since one of the people that opted out was someone that was a really close friend. And what it became true, or what became obvious, was it wasn't necessarily about the fact that they didn't care or they didn't like the person, or not even necessarily that they wouldn't be a buyer. It had a lot more to do with the fact that they just weren't interested in that channel at that time. They just didn't want the emails right now. She said, "Great, when I'm ready, I'll jump back on. I would actually love for you to connect with me." And she gave some feedback, and then that feedback was useful feedback that could go into the next message or the next communication, and it was used. So ask for and value feedback where it makes sense and where it's appropriate. And if you're getting a certain piece of feedback over and over in your messages, in your texts, or even in your conversation, you've got to start taking that on and looking at yourself, looking at your product, look at your offer, and say, where is the issue? Is the issue in the approach? Is the issue in the offer itself, or how the offer is framed, or is it something else? Is it technology? Is it systems? Is it how the offer is it the graphic? Whatever it is. I bring that up because a lot of times feedback is going to get you to that answer, and these are still conversations, especially over everything else. These are conversations. They're marketing conversations, yes, and they might be for getting a prospect going, but that really is important to keep in mind, that it's still people on the other end. It's still got to be in an environment that makes sense. You've still got to take on the feedback. You've still got to ask relevant questions. And so this takes some thought. So notice a lot of you are like, all right, so what do I say? So that's why I gave you that model. You want to focus on connection first. So for me, that connection is, hey, haven't talked to you in a while. Hey, just wanted to check in. Hey, whatever it is. Again, something as casual as I can in the connection phase. An inquiry. So this is going to be something that makes sense for you. So I'm going to use my email example. There was an email that was sent out for a program. And so this inquiry was, I noticed that you checked out the link in my email. I'm looking for feedback. I would love to know what you thought. What was your impression? And then from that, I'm waiting to see what their reaction is. Do they respond quickly or slowly? What does the message look like when they come back? Is it, a long message? Is it a short message? Do they seem interested? Do they seem not interested? Because how the conversation goes from there is generally going to be based on response. The same thing is true of larger scale marketing campaigns. This is what people are trying to do with things like chatbots. This is what people are doing with email automation. This is based, lots of people are automating this process in a very smart way, because these responses over time, or the more you have these conversations. So for a lot of you right now, you're going to be sending out these messages or managing these messages manually to start. But once you start getting into the system, you're going to realize there are opportunities where things are getting repeated over and over and over again, where you might say, great, this could be a process. I could automate the first message I send, or I could automate this series of responses so I don't have to immediately respond to that at this point. All of those things could make sense. But your script has to be formed around connection, inquiry, seeing the reaction, and response to that reaction. And you can map that out. So what I would recommend for a lot of people, use a piece of paper, use a whiteboard, use a funnel tool. Even if you want to be really crazy, I would probably use a funnel tool because that's what I do. And so whatever it is, map it out. Think about what the responses to that thing might be. Or even better, and here is my big suggestion for a lot of you, role play this. Work with a coach, or work with your coach, or work with someone in the community, in the group who's responded to this, whatever, to practice. Have the conversation, work that out, see what types of conversations that start coming up. Even better in a role play, and this is an exercise that I used to use with coaching clients all the time, role play the opposite direction. So you might pretend, if you're the person that's normally sending the message, to be the customer, and you might have the other person pretend to be you, or pretend to be your business, and just watch how they act. So see how they act when they're trying to be you as the business. And this is great even if somebody doesn't know you that well. Just give them the details and say, pretend you're trying to sell this product, and show them a sales page or something. Those can be invaluable exercises and conversations to put you in the mind of how your customer thinks, to get feedback on how the world sees your business, or how people who aren't you talk about your business. Because obviously over time, your biggest source of leads and your biggest source of action is going to be referrals. And so other people are going to be talking about you. So it's really important for you to know, what do they say? Is it in alignment with your message? Does it make sense? Do people see your business or your brand as something totally different than what yours is, or what it actually is? And that infers that maybe you need some work on your messaging a little bit more. But in these messages, again, connect, inquire, see the reaction, respond. If you don't know how to do this, let's get into practice, especially in the community. For those of you that are members of that, I'll actually post a thread for it today. For those of you that are looking for that, or want more of a script for that, to start working on your message, to start role-playing or practicing those conversations. I know a lot of you need to do it, but conversations with Messenger, again, that's how it's going to start. Start by focusing on the connection first, read their profile, keep it casual, and again, take on that feedback, take on that response. It can really make a difference. It can really help you. And I know for a lot of you, I still believe that Messenger, even though a lot more people are turning on to it and there are chatbots and people are automating it, It's still criminally underused. It's still something that most of you have access to hundreds, if not thousands of contacts on your pages, on your personal profile, all over the place that you just don't follow up with, or that you're not sending message to, or you're not staying in contact with. And a lot of times, especially those of you who are struggling with sales, it's because you're not digging back and you're not filling those gaps that we talked about yesterday. So starting conversations with Messenger, that's the model. Let's practice it and talk more about it, and I'll be back with much more very soon. Thank you.